It began in a quiet Hungarian village, nestled beside the river Tisa, a place so ordinary no one would suspect what horrors were brewing beneath the surface. Between the wars, women in Nagyrev smiled politely, raised families, and attended church. But behind lace curtains and within the walls of humble cottages, husbands, fathers, and children began to die, slowly, quietly, and far too often. Was it the water, the weather, or something far more sinister? Welcome to Crime Lab Chronicles, where science meets justice. Today, we unravel the chilling story of the Angel Makers of Nagyrev, a secretive group of women led by a deadly midwife who turned an entire village into a silent graveyard. The mysterious arrival of Julia Fazekas. Little is known about Julia Fazekas before 1911. She appeared almost like a ghost in Nagyrev, an aging widow, gray-streaked hair beneath a midwife's bonnet, with a reputation for helping women in distress. Her husband, she claimed, had passed away. But no one had seen a death certificate. No one ever met the man. In truth, no one dared to ask too many questions. She carried herself with confidence, too much perhaps for a woman in a conservative village. But her services were in demand. Fazekas was a midwife, and for many desperate women, she was also the answer to unwanted pregnancies. Between 1911 and 1921, Fazekas was arrested and jailed at least 10 times for performing illegal abortions. Yet each time, sympathetic judges released her. To them, she wasn't a criminal, just a woman helping other women in a male-dominated world. What they didn't know was that Julia Fazekas had already begun something far darker: war, separation, and the seed of death. In 1914, the Great War broke out. Men across Hungary were conscripted. Husbands vanished into the trenches of France, Russia, and Italy, sometimes never returning. For many women, it was the first time they tasted freedom. And for some, it sparked new relationships with prisoners of war. The village of Nagyrev was home to a POW camp, housing captured Allied soldiers. Romantic affairs between local women and foreign soldiers became common. When the war ended, the Hungarian men returned, many broken, angry, and unaware that their wives had moved on emotionally. What followed was not reconciliation, but resentment. Women trapped in abusive or unwanted marriages began turning to Fazekas again. But this time, it wasn't for abortion. It was for murder. The Arsenic, Julia Fazekas had access to everything a midwife needed: herbs, instruments, and poison. She began collecting arsenic by boiling down flypaper, a common household item soaked in arsenic-laced glue. Soon, a quiet business began to thrive. Women came to Fazekas in secret, whispering of violent husbands, drunken fathers, or even bothersome relatives. They didn't want divorce, they wanted release. And Fazekas provided it. She would hand over small bottles, instructing the women to administer a few drops into their husband's soup or wine. The poison worked slowly. Victims would fall ill over several days or weeks, vomiting, convulsing, weakening, until their bodies gave out. Doctors, often underpaid and overworked, would sign off on the deaths as natural: cholera, pneumonia, heart failure. No one suspected the truth at first. A town of silent graves. Over time, death in Nagyrev became routine. Between 1914 and 1929, an estimated 140 deaths occurred under suspicious circumstances. Entire families were wiped out. Children died. Elderly relatives perished. Widows grew richer. Young women remarried. And no one seemed to question the convenience of it all. Fazekas had effectively created a network, a community of female killers. They called themselves the Angel Makers. Many women were complicit, but few ever spoke openly. It was a conspiracy bound by desperation and grief, and fueled by the failures of a patriarchal society. To these women, the poison wasn't just death, it was liberation. But in the 1920s, cracks began to appear in the silence. Whispers and exhumations. In 1929, a suspicious town clerk began noticing the pattern of frequent deaths in Nagyrev. Too many husbands were dying. Too many widows seemed oddly calm. An anonymous letter was sent to the police. It detailed rumors of arsenic, flypaper, and a midwife named Fazekas. Authorities began investigating quietly. Exhumations followed. What they found was undeniable. Corpses bore telltale signs of arsenic poisoning. Traces of the toxin were discovered in the organs and tissues of dozens of exhumed bodies. News spread like wildfire. Hungarian authorities arrested 34 women and one man, all connected to Fazekas' circle. The village, once quiet and unnoticed, was now the center of one of the most shocking murder cases in European history. Trial of the Angel Makers. The trials began in 1930. Locals were stunned as the depth of the conspiracy was revealed. Testimony after testimony implicated Julia Fazekas and her followers. Women took the stand, weeping or stone-faced, confessing to the murders of husbands, fathers, and even children. Some claimed they had no choice, beaten by their spouses, trapped in poverty, or pressured by others in the village. Others seemed eerily proud, describing the poisonings in cold, methodical detail. The public was outraged, but also fascinated. Newspapers dubbed them the Angel Makers of Nagyrev. Some called them monsters, others symbols of a failed society that left women powerless and unheard. Julia Fazekas never stood trial. As the investigation closed in, she drank a vial of her own arsenic and died by suicide. Justice, or something like it. Of the 35 arrested, at least 8 women were sentenced to death, though only 2 were actually executed. Others received long prison terms. Many confessed to multiple murders. The courts tried to make an example out of them, but the truth was more complicated than the justice system could handle. Forensic science had proven crucial in cracking the case. The exhumed remains, analyzed for arsenic, provided undeniable evidence. Without the chemical tests, the crimes might have remained buried forever. But science could not explain everything. It could not answer why so many participated or why it took years for anyone to notice. The Angel Makers were not serial killers in the traditional sense. They were something else, something born of oppression, grief, and rage. Legacy of a village poisoned, Nagyrev never recovered its innocence. Even decades later, the village remained infamous, whispered about in criminal psychology textbooks and forensic lectures. What happened there was not just a crime, it was a social phenomenon. The Angel Makers of Nagyrev challenge us to look beyond the headlines. Were these women ruthless killers? Or were they victims of a world that left them no other choice? They weaponized knowledge. They have passed down in whispers, turned domestic tools into instruments of death, and created a sisterhood built on silence. Today, forensic science continues to evolve, but the human motives behind crime remain as dark and tangled as ever. What do you think? Were the Angel Makers of Nagyrev villains or a grim reflection of their time? Let us know in the comments. This was Crime Lab Chronicles, where science meets justice. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And check out the links in the description to support our work and explore more chilling cases where chemistry, courage, and crime collide. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.